Most of the video games that were done in the 90s and early 2000s would never be able to be recreated today, simply because they were incredibly politically incorrect. Take Fallout.
There, beautiful. What can Myron do for you? Say, you one of Mordino's new whores or just a big fan of Myron? Ooh, you got a name to go with those legs, beautiful?
If you played a female character, you could make very easy 500 credits by sleeping with the first NPC that you saw. You also could persuade a slave dealer by the name of Mensger to give you a discount for a slave if you fucked with him. Now, these options weren't allowed to male characters, and as you play the game, you would notice that female characters also have certain restrictions. For example, there was a gang in New Reno that wouldn't allow females to join the gang. The political incorrectness wouldn't stop there, by the way, as you could kill children in the Fallout game, which gave you the perk of Child Killer, making your reputation drop significantly across the wasteland. And killing those little buggers was something that the game would really tempt you on occasions. Like, for example, when entering a casino, two kids outside would pickpocket you. And the only way to get your stuff back would be either try to steal them back from the kids, which would turn the entire town hostile on you if you failed the check, or just put a grenade with a low timer in one of those children's pocket and watch it go boom. And it was this level of creativity and freedom and different choices that you could take that made Fallout a really amazing RPG of its time. Planescape Torment took all of those decisions and dialed them up all the way to 11. You see, while other role-playing games focused on combat and building up your character to be more aggressive and try to dominate the enemies through brute force, Planescape Torment went on the completely other way around, where having a high charisma and being able to talk and interact with different characters was actually the focus of the game. Planescape Torment had very little combat and a lot of dialogue. A lot of dialogue. And for some reason, a lot of people seem to like this, especially since your decisions shaped the ending. Your decisions would shape how different characters interacted with you. And the game story was quite captivating. You see, this was a time when special effects and cool graphics would take a back seat in order to allow story and character development to shine. This was a time when gameplay was the number one factor of a video game and everything else came secondary. Now, I was extremely excited to hear that a game called Disco Elysium is coming out, and by the way the developers described this video game, a lot of people, especially on Reddit, started comparing it to Planescape Torment, which made me really hyped up for this game. It also took a very interesting approach on how leveling up your character would be like. You see, in most games, having a stat means that putting as many points into it will get your character to be really proficient at that thing. However, Disco Elysium takes a different approach. Take empathy, for example. Having a low empathy means that your character would not understand and would not be able to interpret certain actions that NPCs take, because the character would lack the ability to put themselves into their shoes. However, having too high of an empathy means that your character is going to be an emotional wreck, as it will not be able to pass by any NPC that's suffering without at least stopping and trying to offer some words of comfort. Another example would be Inland Empire, the ability of your character to imagine things. Having too low in the skill set means that your character completely lacks imagination. He would be like Drax the Destroyer from Guardians of the Galaxy, where everything that's metaphoric would fly past him. While having too high of an Inland Empire means that your character would go insane. He would think that his tie or his suit is speaking to him. Finally, my favorite one is Authority, where if your character has no points in Authority, he will not be able to impose himself in any situation, even when dealing with children, while having too high of an authority means that he will not be able to let any slight past him. Even if a kid would insult him, he would not let it stand. He would have to answer to someone stepping up to him. So this was a very interesting concept. Furthermore, as you can see, the game seems to be set in 4 different skill trees. One skill tree based on endurance and strength, another skill tree based on agility, one that is based on emotions, and one that is based on intelligence and logic. And this means you would have to create a character that's really great at one of these skills, good or acceptable at a second, and poor at the other two. Which means that you would have certain replayability to this game. You could tackle the game as a very agile and powerful cop, but one that's dumb and doesn't really understand the people around him. Or maybe a very smart and intelligent cop with a high emotional intelligence, but he would pass out the moment someone gave him a frowny face. Now, as I finally got my hands on the game and I played it, I have to say I had a lot of fun for the first 2 hours or so. The story was quite captivating. The characters that I met were really interesting. And just like Planescape, your character is suffering from amnesia, and one of the mysteries is to try to figure out how he got to the point where he was at the start of the game. And even though amnesia seems to be a story gimmick that a lot of video games are doing, I kind of like it in a way. I especially like it when it's done in a good, positive way, the role-playing game. So finding out who you are, why some NPCs hate you, and why some NPCs like you was a very entertaining part of playing Disco Elysium. Another awesome part is that the game allows you to choose from different political philosophies that your character can internalize into his head. So you can be a communist, you can be a liberal, you can be a nationalist, you can even be a full-blown racist. For example, there is this NPC you get to meet in the game called Measurehead. And he is very funny to interact with. The moment he sees you, he asks what is it with that pitiful display of androgyny that your character is showing if you have very low strength and very low agility. He's got 3 women that are fawning over him because he's very muscular, very intimidating, and pretty much every line that he gives has a lot of comedic value. Now, talking with Measurehead, he explains how the world is separated between the races. You got the races that are the dominant ones, the races that are the submissive ones, and the races which he believes are needed to be purged. Basically, interracial people that don't really have a firm place in his ideology. Now, if you're so inclined, you can internalize his worldview and your character gets to become a racist. You can do the same when you meet a communist and you can internalize his Marxism views. And you can do the same when you meet a liberal and you can internalize his views. And it's quite funny that your character can literally internalize all 3 of these worldviews. And they give you different traits and different bonuses, as well as certain punishments. For example, you being a cop and also being a racist might affect the ending in a negative way. However, as you play the game for more than 2 hours, a lot of its flaws become painfully apparent. For example, the one thing that I really liked was that your character can have flaws, and if you play a very intelligent police officer, you will not have enough points to put in endurance and agility. However, there is a way to bypass this. Placing different clothes in the game will give you certain bonuses. So if you have a character that is very intelligent but places on very intimidating looking clothes, well, now you're intelligent and intimidating, so you can kind of cover the flaw that your character has. And if you know the type of check that you need to pass in a conversation, you can just stop the conversation, change your attire to maximize the points into that particular skill that's needed, and you will manage to pass. So it kind of kills the replayability for me, considering that I have managed to pass almost all the difficult checks by using the method that I have mentioned above. Another main problem seems to me that the communists always win. Now, while I did like the way the game developers depicted the communists, the boss leader, the union leader, seems to be a very wealthy person that, despite of his ideological preachings, he does make quite a wealth for himself. And him and his union make the law around the parts where you play the game at. Now, his main goal is to take away the harbor that he works under for him and his union. You see, he does work for a multinational company, but the moment him and every worker just starts rioting, the company has to choose between sending an attack copter and a couple of mercenaries to reinstate order, but that would look very bad on the company image, or just let him have that specific terminal. Now, the thing that I really hated is that when you start the game, you're a police officer that has lost his badge, has lost his gun, and has lost his car. And if you want a good ending, you have to find all these items by the end of the game. Unfortunately, the only way to get your gun back is to do the biddings of this communist. He is basically blackmailing you into getting certain signatures from some people to move out of their houses so he can build some cultural center there. And there is no other option but to do this for him, which would make the police look as if they are supporting this communist movement. So I found it despicable that the game forces you to do this. Later on, from the development Q&A that they gave to Polygon, it seems that the developers of this game are blatant communists, and this probably is one of the reasons why this was shoehorned into the game, where you have to feel dirty doing an ideology that you as the player might not want your character to do in order to get a good ending, just because the developers kind of nudge you and push you down that path. And I really do not appreciate this into a role-playing game. I want to have choice. I want to have different ways of obtaining something, and not just be handheld by the quote-unquote correct path that the developers are sending me towards. Finally, the thing that really turned me off from this game, and I would really question if I were to purchase its sequel, is the fact that, well, this is a detective type of game, and the most important things when reading a detective novel or a detective story is to try to figure out who did it, is to try to get the clues that the author is handing you, and try to figure out which might be the culprit. And I think I was doing a really great job at it. I think my character was running circles around the communists. I think I was managing to find difficult clues that normally I would not be able to find on a first playthrough, and I kind of figured out which is the culprit. However, all of a sudden, the game just says, no, the culprit that we kind of built up the entire story around isn't really the person who did it. And you have to go into the front of this house and just make a really stupid check that is called Feel the Wind. And you need to also have a lot of points. I believe it was in a really weird skill called Esprit de Corps or Conceptualization. I forgot which one, but it's like a really low importance secondary skill. And after you pass this check, you manage to go in another area of the game. And this person that you've never met, that throughout the entire game you never interact with or even hear about this person's existence, well, apparently he is the one which did the hanging. So, to me, this was a really big slap in the face towards anyone that tries to figure out the mystery. It's like the subversion of my expectations. Kind of makes all of the effort and all of the thinking involved in the beginning parts of the game redundant and useless. So I really didn't appreciate the way the game developers wrapped up the whole story. The ending is also really lame. You get to meet with the people from your police force, you get a little dialogue, and that's it. So overall, while the game started off very strong, while I was really excited about playing something that's like Planescape Torment, after several hours of playthrough, you end up being disappointed. And the people who haven't finished the game and just played half of it probably don't know what I'm talking about. They will be like, well, V, it's a really good game. What are you talking about? But you need to finish it to understand my big levels of disappointment. The fact that your character becomes really great at everything by the end of the game after just dumping experience points into it really makes it difficult to replay the game. The fact that while you can internalize certain ideologies and be a communist or be a capitalist or be a racist, don't really change the dialogue. Like you get the options to push for the communist revolution even if you don't internalize Marxism. So again, the internalization mechanic is just a gimmick to get a couple of bonuses or a couple of disadvantages, but it's not really required for any checks or progression through the game. So the game starts really great and ends up to be very shallow. I would definitely give it a 6 out of 10. Wouldn't really recommend it for people unless they're really bored. And unfortunately, I really wanted to enjoy this, but I just didn't for the things that I mentioned above.